My parents told me they were struggling with payments, but a neighbor revealed they had been renting out our house the entire time. 3 years ago, my parents called me crying. My dad said they were on the verge of losing our family home. My mom sounded exhausted. They told me the mortgage payments had become impossible. I was 28 and living 2 states away. That house was where I grew up. Every birthday, every holiday, every major memory was tied to it. My parents said they needed help. I believed them immediately. Over the next 3 years, I sent them money almost every month. Sometimes it was $300. Sometimes it was over $1,000. Whenever I asked how things were going, they said they were barely hanging on. Whenever I suggested selling the house, they became defensive. They insisted they could save it if they just had a little more time. Then one afternoon, a neighbor from my childhood changed everything with a single sentence. I had gone home unexpectedly for a work conference. I decided to drive through my old neighborhood. The street looked mostly the same. The lawns were a little different. Some houses had new paint. I parked near my parents' place. As I walked down the sidewalk, Mrs. Walker from next door spotted me. She immediately smiled and hugged me. We talked for a few minutes. Then she casually asked if I was staying with the tenants. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. She looked confused. "What tenants?" I asked. "The people renting your parents' house," she said. For a second, I thought she had mistaken the address. Then she pointed directly at my parents' house. My stomach dropped. I told her my parents lived there. She shook her head. "No, honey, they moved out years ago." I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I asked where they moved. She said she wasn't sure. She only knew renters had been coming and going for almost 3 years, almost exactly as long as my parents had supposedly been struggling with payments. I thanked her and walked away. My hands were shaking. I stared at the house. The curtains were different. The front porch furniture was unfamiliar. Things I should have noticed immediately suddenly became obvious. I called my mother. She answered cheerfully. I asked where she was. She said she was at home. I asked her to look out the front window. Silence. Then she asked what I meant. I told her I was standing outside the house. Another silence, a much longer one. Then she said they were staying somewhere else temporarily because of repairs. The explanation came too quickly. I asked what repairs. She couldn't answer immediately. She started listing random issues, a plumbing problem, electrical work, foundation concerns. Nothing made sense. Mrs. Walker had said tenants had lived there for years, not weeks. Years. I told my mother I wanted the address. She hesitated, then she gave it to me. The address was 20 minutes away. I drove there immediately. The house I found wasn't some temporary rental. It was a beautiful property in a gated community. It was larger than our childhood home, much larger. The driveway contained 2 newer vehicles. I sat in my car staring at it. My father stepped outside carrying groceries. His face went completely white when he saw me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I finally asked one question. "What is this?" My father looked exhausted. Not surprised, not confused, just exhausted. He told me we should go inside. The moment I entered, I realized something was very wrong. This wasn't a rental. Family photos covered the walls. Their furniture was arranged permanently. Closets were full. The pantry was stocked. They had clearly been living there for years. My mother emerged from the kitchen. She looked like she had been expecting this day. I asked them why they lied. My father sat down heavily. My mother immediately started crying. Neither answered. That silence told me more than any explanation could. I demanded the truth. My father finally spoke. He said they never intended for things to go this far. That answer only created more questions. I asked if they were actually struggling financially. He said yes. Then I asked how they could afford this house. Another silence. Then he said the situation was complicated. I left before they could explain further. I was too angry to listen. That night I went through years of bank transfers. The total stunned me. I had given them nearly $40,000, $40,000, money I could have used for my own home, money I could have invested, money I had sacrificed because I believed they were in danger. I barely slept. The next morning I started investigating. I searched property records online. What I found made even less sense. My parents still owned our childhood home. They also owned the gated community house. Both properties were in their names. The second house had been purchased 4 years earlier, a full year before they first claimed financial hardship. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Why would people struggling with mortgage payments buy another house? I called my younger sister. She lived closer to them. When I told her what I discovered, she went quiet. Then she admitted something strange. Our parents had asked her for money too, not as much as me, but enough to matter. She thought she was helping save the family home. Suddenly, I wasn't the only victim. My sister had contributed almost $15,000. Neither of us knew about the other. Our parents had kept us separated. They always told me not to burden my sister. Apparently, they told her the same thing about me. The realization made me sick. They had intentionally hidden the truth. My sister and I decided to compare notes. The pattern became obvious immediately. Every crisis appeared shortly before a request for money. a leaking roof, a mortgage increase, unexpected taxes, emergency repairs. Every story was designed to create urgency. Every story ended with a request, and somehow they always needed just enough money to avoid disaster. But there was another detail, one that bothered me more than anything. The amounts never matched the supposed problems. Sometimes they asked for thousands for repairs that should have cost hundreds. Other times they asked for small amounts during supposedly catastrophic emergencies. The numbers felt random, almost like the money wasn't actually going where they claimed. I kept digging. Then I discovered something else. The childhood home had been listed as a rental online multiple times. The rental history stretched back nearly 3 years. I found old listings, photos, descriptions, monthly rental rates. The house had generated substantial income my parents never mentioned. At that point, I assumed greed was the answer. I thought they were simply exploiting us. But then another clue appeared, one that complicated everything. The gated community house had multiple loans attached to it, large loans, far larger than I expected. My parents weren't wealthy. In fact, they appeared heavily indebted. That contradicted my theory. If they were pocketing rent and our money, where was it all going? The numbers didn't add up. A week later, I confronted them again. This time, my sister came with me. We sat across from our parents at their dining table. I laid out everything. The rental records, the property documents, the bank transfers, the hidden house. My father looked defeated. My mother cried almost immediately. Finally, my father told us the truth, or at least what sounded like the truth. 4 years earlier, he had invested in a business opportunity. A friend promised huge returns. The investment collapsed. He lost nearly all of his retirement savings. Then he borrowed money trying to recover the losses. Those investments failed too. The debts grew rapidly. My mother didn't learn the full extent until it was too late. When creditors started calling, panic set in. They purchased the second house before the losses became catastrophic. The plan was to downsize later and profit from appreciation. Instead, everything spiraled. To cover debts, they rented our childhood home. Then they began borrowing from us. They convinced themselves it was temporary, just enough to stabilize things, just enough to recover, just enough until the next investment paid off. Except none of them did. I wanted to believe him. Parts of the story made sense, but something still felt wrong. One question remained unanswered. Why lie about where they lived? Why pretend the mortgage was the problem? Why hide the rental income? My father couldn't look at me when I asked. My mother answered instead. She said they were ashamed. Ashamed of the debt. Ashamed of the failed investments. Ashamed that they had destroyed their finances after decades of hard work. The mortgage story sounded more respectable. People struggle with housing costs all the time. People are sympathetic. People help. Admitting they had gambled away their future felt humiliating. I wanted to accept that explanation. Then my sister asked a question neither of us had considered. Who was the friend? My father's face changed immediately. The room went silent. He looked toward my mother. My mother looked away. That reaction told us everything. There was more, a lot more. After several minutes, my father finally spoke. The friend wasn't just a friend. It was his younger brother, our uncle. The same uncle who rarely attended family gatherings. The same uncle who always seemed to disappear for months at a time. The same uncle who constantly pitched business ideas. Apparently, he had convinced my father to invest repeatedly. Each failure led to another opportunity, another promise, another chance to recover losses. My father trusted him because he was family. Eventually, the investments became loans, then personal guarantees, then debt. My father wasn't just funding bad businesses. He was secretly covering my uncle's obligations. Millions of dollars flowed through accounts over several years. By the time he realized the truth, most of the money was gone. My uncle declared bankruptcy. My father couldn't. He was left carrying the consequences. Suddenly, earlier events made sense. The random requests, the inconsistent amounts, the constant emergencies. They weren't funding mortgage payments. They were plugging holes in a sinking ship. But even then, something still bothered me. If shame was the reason, why continue lying for years? Why not tell us once the situation became impossible? My mother answered that question quietly, because every time we helped, it worked. Not permanently, but temporarily. Each payment bought another month, another chance, another delay. Eventually, the lie became too large to confess. The longer it continued, the harder honesty became. I wish that explanation had brought closure. Instead, it made me sad, because I understood it, not the deception, but the fear behind it. For weeks, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, pity, resentment, love, all at once. Then another revelation arrived, one final piece of the puzzle. My sister called me after meeting with our parents. Our father had shown her financial documents, everything, the debts, the loans, the transactions. There was no hidden fortune, no secret account, no lavish spending, no luxury lifestyle funded by our money. The reality was somehow worse. They truly had been drowning. Every dollar we sent disappeared into interest payments and debt obligations. The money wasn't stolen for pleasure. It was consumed by desperation. That didn't excuse the lies, but it changed how I viewed them. A month later, our parents sold both houses, the childhood home, the gated community house, everything. The proceeds weren't enough to erase the debt completely, but it came close. They moved into a small apartment. For the first time in years, there were no secrets, at least none that we knew about. I thought the story ended there. I was wrong. 6 months later, my uncle contacted me. I hadn't spoken to him throughout the entire ordeal. He asked if we could meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. What he told me changed my understanding one final time. He admitted the investments failed. He admitted my father lost enormous amounts of money, but he denied intentionally deceiving him. According to my uncle, my father wasn't some innocent victim. He was a willing participant. In fact, many of the riskiest decisions were my father's idea. The two brothers had chased profits together. When things worked, they celebrated together. When things collapsed, my father rewrote history. I didn't know who to believe. Maybe neither version was entirely true. Maybe both were. Families rarely have a single villain. They usually have multiple people making bad decisions for reasons that feel justified at the time. I never learned the complete truth. I probably never will. But I did learn something unsettling. The biggest lie wasn't that my parents were struggling with mortgage payments. The biggest lie was the image I carried of them. I had always viewed them as responsible adults who understood money better than I did. Discovering their mistakes shattered that illusion. They weren't masterminds. They weren't scammers. They weren't even especially greedy. They were frightened people trying to outrun consequences they created themselves. Sometimes I drive past my childhood neighborhood. Different renters live in that house now. The porch looks different. The yard has changed. Nothing feels familiar anymore, and every time I pass it, I remember the moment Mrs. Walker casually asked whether I was staying with the tenants. One ordinary sentence, one accidental revelation, one crack in a story that had taken years to build. Without her, I might still be sending money. I might still believe the mortgage was the problem. I might still think my parents lived inside the house that existed only in my memories. Instead, I learned how easily love can be manipulated by fear. I learned how shame can turn honest people into liars. And I learned that sometimes the most disturbing part of a family's secret isn't discovering the truth. It's realizing how many warning signs made perfect sense only after everything finally came apart.